All right, I hope you've enjoyed the little series we've had on how various alternative construction methods compare to AirCrete. And this video is going to be a quick summary of those processes. So let's get started. Earth bag. Earth bag, you fill up some bags, you lay down barbed wire between them, you tamp them in place, you plaster the walls, and what you wind up with is a thermal mass structure, and it can become too cold in the winter, too hot in the summer, and it's not always appropriate. And if there's a crack, if you just have a plaster on it instead of a roof, very often structures will get little cracks, the walls will become full of water, and it causes a very humid interior where you can never be cool enough or warm enough. And so there's some issues with that. Construction needs to have a good roof on it. If it gets soaked, the whole wall can literally just fall out. But it's free, it's nearly free. The bags are reasonably priced, and it requires a fairly large amount of excavation, and if you're doing it by hand, it's a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of time as well. Next, let's talk about cob. Cob, again, you have to excavate a lot of material. You have to import straw, and straw is not always available. Often by the time you've shipped it in, it's actually very expensive. Just as expensive as AirCrete if you're actually buying it in from a long distance. And then there's the issues with how straw can get into your sinuses and stuff. I can't account for why, but straw really seems to mess my sinuses up for a week now. And I can only assume that it's because of all the pesticides and stuff that are sprayed on that straw. But with cob, what you wind up with is a slightly insulating thermal mass mix that will not provide any insulation, and so in extreme climates it doesn't always provide the comfort without a lot of input. But basically you mix your clay, your sand, your silt, you stomp it all together, you mix it in with straw, and then just literally daub it in place. And it's a very intuitive building system. It's very beautiful. Anybody can do it, so it's readily available to almost anybody at any skill level. It can be learned pretty quickly. So it has a lot of positive benefits in that regard. Let's talk about rammed earth. Rammed earth is where, again, like cob or similar, you need the right balance of clay and sand to mix, and then you dampen it down, you pack it into forms, and you have to excavate a great deal of material. It takes a great deal of labor. Even with a bobcat or front end loader and the pneumatic or hydraulic tamping tool to pack it into the forms, it can be a great deal of work. And by itself, it's just thermal mass. It's not insulation, not really good for a passive design. Yes, it can be very beautiful if you color the mixture and get that right. But also, if you don't have sand or you don't have clay on your site, those materials have to be purchased in and they have to be mined from somewhere else. And in the modern rammed earth homes, they all have a foam core in the middle of the rammed earth, or a 4-inch foam board layer on the outside with a fabric or wire and an acrylic stucco mix applied to the outside, so that you now have insulation and thermal mass. And those structures are not only beautiful, they're very energy efficient, and they're very stable in their temperature throughout the year, so you can heat them and cool them and keep them at the comfort level that you desire. But again, it's about the amount of time and the amount of labor that goes into building something like that really has to be carefully considered, as well as the materials that are available on your site. Beyond rammed earth, there's the granddaddy of alternative building, or the icon of alternative building, the earthship, where instead of having to be critical with your mixture of clay and sand and packing it into forms, you use tires and you pack your earth into the tires and they hold the wall together. The early versions, where it was just rammed earth, they really did not perform well at all in extreme climates of heat or cold, because they were just thermal mass and susceptible, and what you wind up with is the average of the day's highs and lows expanded over a period of time for the amount of thermal mass around you. And now in the new version of Simple Survival and the new houses, that entire earth berm is now enveloped in a foam board. So now again you have insulation and you have thermal mass, and you have an almost ideal home that is very comfortable with a very stable temperature. And what you find in extremely cold or extremely hot and humid environments like this one is that even with that construction, that the temperature will rise throughout the summer, and toward the end of summer, in one house we built over here, that average temperature winds up to be 89 degrees toward the end of summer. And while that's great going into fall and winter because it's very warm in there, it's actually uncomfortable to sleep in with the humidity in this environment. The cool tube does not remove enough of the moisture. And then as you get toward the end of winter, it winds up very cold if you're not providing supplemental heat and cooling to such a structure. So it is a wonderful, wonderful design, no doubt about it. Earthships are amazing. You need machinery because a great deal of material has to be excavated or excavated somewhere else and hauled in to you to berm up your structure. And so you have some expense with that and a fair amount of time. And if you're tamping earth in the tires, it takes a ridiculous amount of time and labor to do that, and the excavation of all that material can be a real backbreaker if you're doing it manually. So the other thing that earthships are well known for is the fact that they collect their own water, they clean their water, they provide their own energy, they treat their own water, waste products, they reuse some of that water, and all of that and more is being done inside of AirCrete as well. And so after that, let's talk about the straw bale house. The straw bale house, you have to import straw, and it needs to be straw. It needs to have that hollow stem for insulation. They're very, very insulating structures like AirCrete. They're easy to heat and cool. Heat them with a hand candle, cool them with an ice cube. Very efficient, very practical. But availability of straw, like in this area, or not near an agricultural area, and by the time you buy your straw bales and have them trucked into here, it costs as much or more than AirCrete. And then there's a waiting list, the availability issues, and again, there's the sinus issue. It just absolutely tears my sinuses up. I've become really sensitized to that straw. If you have cracks in plaster, rodents can get in and make a nice bathroom out of your walls. And it's really something that has to be looked after a little more carefully. But they are beautiful structures, and they're very energy efficient and very beautiful, very nice to stay in, and not always the most convenient. But anyway, you stack your straw, you drive rebar pins or bamboo pins through to secure all the bales together so you have a stable wall. You can build a load-bearing house where all the weight of the roof sits on the straw and it's strapped, or with rebar or something, or perhaps all thread. The roof is attached down to the foundation so it doesn't blow away. Or you have a post and beam structure where you have a roof supported by post, and you use straw bales as an infill insulation blocks to fill in the walls. And then you apply chicken wire or various wires. You sew a wire through the wall, wrap it around your wire or fabric, whatever you're using on the outside, and you tie the inside wire to the outside wire, and then you simply plaster the inside and outside, and you wind it with a very beautiful house that, again, in comparison to AirCrete, is in my opinion, cost-wise, it's about the same. Insulation-wise is about the same, and it's just the availability, the convenience issue with straw bale where AirCrete wins out, in my opinion. Light clay slip straw construction. When you take straw, you can use pine needles, pampa grass, almost any cellulose type material. You tumble it, you toss it in a coating of clay slip, the kind of thick liquidy mixture like you would use for making pottery. And after all your material is coated, you put it inside of forms, you pack it inside of forms. It's not a load-bearing material, so again, you need the post and beam structure where you have posts holding up your roof, as well as either cross support or connections inside of the wall so that the straw clay mixture doesn't come loose in the wall. It's an old building method. People are still living in houses like that today, and it provides an insulation about half of a typical house. So you need a wall, in my opinion, at least 1 foot thick. And then you have a good insulating structure that's very cheap, very non-toxic, off the land, more available than straw if you're not going to use straw. If you're going to use straw, then again you run into the issue of importing an expensive material from a very long ways away, and you wind up with a cost very similar to AirCrete. And again, the waiting list for straw. Let's talk about all of these building materials in their pure die-hard form. Any structure that provides just thermal mass is not going to provide insulation. It's going to heat up. It's going to get uncomfortable if you live in extreme climates. If you don't live in the ideal climate where your day and your night, minute by minute temperature average out to something nice, like for example, if it's 100 during the day and 50 at night, you average out at a nice 75-degree temperature. But when you live in a climate like this, where the temperature is 100 during the day and 89 and very humid at night, what you wind up with is a house that is often a lot hotter inside than outside during the summer, and colder inside than outside in the day during the winter. And that means pumping a lot of energy into such a structure to keep it comfortable. And if you're doing a passive design, it really doesn't work so well. And on the other side, when you have just insulation like AirCrete or straw bale building, or even light slip clay straw building that's thick enough, you have an insulation without a thermal mass, so it does not lend itself to the thermal mass that you need to stabilize your temperature. But it does lend itself to applying modern technology like ground source heat pumps, which don't use any more energy than a ground cool tube system, with forcing enough air through with fans over time uses the same amount of energy, and yet you get to choose your temperature. And even with a mini split heat pump for 500 watts on a solar system, you can heat and cool your structure to the temperature that you choose, not what the environment gives you. So that is a very big advantage. For passive design, let's talk about hybridizing these. Instead of being die-hard to one particular type of building, if you can combine insulation and thermal mass, you wind up with an ideal situation, like the new Earth ships that envelop a great deal of Earth inside of a foam envelope. That provides you a great temperature stability, as well as something that can be heated and cooled and maintained very efficiently. And it's, you could combine straw bale with rammed earth, for example, or rammed earth or earth brick with straw bale or light clay straw building, or AirCrete with rammed earth, or any such combination, or earth berm with sealed AirCrete as insulation around that envelope. So if you're talking about passive, completely natural designs, while AirCrete isn't natural, it's insulation. So it's about examining all of these different methodologies of building and doing what's appropriate in the appropriate way to work for your climate and your wishes. So that's really all we're saying about all this, and I pick AirCrete to be the winner because AirCrete is so immediately available. I order materials, they're here the next day. By myself, I can put up a reasonable sized house in 14 days ready to move into. And a lot of those days when you're putting up the wall is really just about 4 hours a day of mixing AirCrete, pouring your form, and then leaving till the next day to let the AirCrete set up before you add the next layer. And so it's really not a tremendous amount of labor, whereas other methods do offer a tremendous amount of backbreaking labor and or expensive machinery to get built, and or buying in other materials anyway and having them hauled into site to get the right clay, sand, silt mixture for your structure. Whereas AirCrete, you just literally haul in the bags, you throw a 92-pound sack of cement in 6 gallons of water, you turn on the foam generator, you foam it up to 6 cubic feet, you scoop it out, you pour it into your molds, and you let it sit, and then you wrap it with an acrylic, you wrap it with fabric with an acrylic cement around that to bond it to the walls, to give it tensile strength, and you have an easily heated and cooled structure very rapidly, reasonably affordably. Somebody on minimum wage can build something. They can buy a piece of land and build a tiny house within a year tops. And of course that depends on your ability to budget and save your money. But it's very doable, it's very in reach of everybody, and it's immensely practical. It's available now, so it's practical, it's now, it's high speed, it's affordable, it's available, and you know, the fact is that as long as our society is building roads and putting pads down for houses and building sidewalks, we're just going to be strip mining the limestone and baking it and creating our Portland cement. So, you know, whatever you choose, make sure that you choose an appropriate technology and combination of technologies for whatever you're going to build. With AirCrete, if I wanted a passive structure, then I would simply combine a thermal mass on the inside, or I would provide a 40-watt water pump and an insulated water tank, and I would use that to exchange the temperature, to even out the temperature to a good solid amount. And we have a specific number of gallons per square foot figure for that, so it's easy to do. You know, we're going to be building a lot of passive greenhouses as well as houses with AirCrete, because they do provide insulation, and with a little proper thermal mass, it can easily balance out. If you wanted a absolutely completely passive design in the west with AirCrete, I would simply do night sky radiant cooling with a 40-watt water pump, and it would absolutely provide the stable temperature for the heating and cooling of your house. If you're in more humid climates and cloudy climates, then you're going to have to do something more appropriate. It may just simply be solar cells or solar and or wind turbines to provide power to run something like a mini split heat pump system. I mean, you can run them on 500 watts. You can buy a multi-stage unit where you can build multiple small structures, all heated and cooled on a single heat pump. And I really don't believe it's inappropriate at all, because I mean, I use computers, I use technology, they make my life better. You're obviously using a computer or a phone or something to watch this. So, you know, using the appropriate technology like a mini split air conditioner and some solar cells to give yourself 20 years of free heating and cooling at the temperature that you choose, instead of whatever the environment happens to be giving you, and whatever the climate is changing with, you'll remain comfortable. And so, you know, there it is in a nutshell. That's my bias towards AirCrete, is that after having built and lived in all of these structures, ultimately, as I get older, I want the comfort. I want to be able to choose my temperature. And in my climate, it would never be acceptable to just take the average of the highs and lows throughout the summer and winter. In your climate, it may very well be fine. So that's it. That's the summary of it. And having wrapped up that series, as well as a week of sleeping and living inside of this little micro tiny house AirCrete structure, I absolutely love AirCrete. It's just a wonderful material. It's nice to be in, and of course I really like these round structures. To me, they're the perfect mixture. Domes would require extensive molding or air forms to blow up, like AirCrete Harry's doing, but you can make a very cheap structure. A structure like this little structure can be built for under $1,000. So it's so superior to a tent or an RV in terms of something to live in. You could just put one of these up in 2 weeks or on weekends out on your property when you're off work, and you would immediately have a place to live, to get out of rent or mortgage, and to build your real house later from. And certainly if you want a guest house or something, I mean, it's so easy to put up for a house or a studio, a bug out location that will not be eaten by rats and termites. And that's another thing. AirCrete is not only energy efficient, it's pest proof. It's not going to rot and mold if it gets flooded. If you happen to have a forest fire, it's not going to be destroyed in fire. It's fairly sound resistant. It's fairly temperature stable. And, you know, all of this adds up to a structure that is wonderful to live in. And of course, you could mold it, like if you wanted to build a rectangular house with what looks like lap siding, so it looks like every other house in your neighborhood, you simply build rectangular molds, you put some lap siding or some vacuum formed plastic on the inside of your mold. You cast your house. When you pull the form off, it looks just like lap siding. Give it a paint job and a conventional roof, and no one would ever know the difference. They would never know that it's not a conventional structure. AirCrete, of course, is just insulation, and it is slightly less insulating than conventional fiberglass insulation, about 6% less. So, we have a video on how to do an actual heat load measurement of your physical structure to know how much heating and cooling your structure will need. So with that very practical information, as well as free calculators at our website, tinygiantlife.biz, you can estimate the cost of building whatever size structure you would like ahead of time. So click the link below in the description to find out more about our Terlingua School of Alternative Building, where you can learn to build this, as well as all of the skills that go into making a house actually livable. Because putting up your walls, that's just 10 or 20% of the job. We teach all the skills: electrical, plumbing, flooring, finishing, roofing, etc., etc. Air conditioning, and all this goes into making a house livable. But also, we have a video course available. You can click the link below in the description, find out about that video course. You can learn how to make AirCrete to build a dome. And of course, if you browse through the rest of our YouTube videos, all the information on how to make AirCrete and how to build with it, it's really in there. It's all exposed. It's all available for free if you're willing to dig through the videos and find that information. I would be very interested to hear your opinions on the various types of building styles, how you might think to put together or hybridize two different types of alternative building to create the ideal structure. Whatever you do, be appropriate for what your needs are, what your wants are now and in the future when you get older, such as comfort, as well as budget, as well as practicality, as well as something you're actually going to finish. Not still be packing or ramming earth years later, because most of us don't have a large family, and a lot of us don't have access to a great deal of friends and family to rush in and really labor to build a structure. So just consider all these things. That's been the purpose of this series. And yes, I'm absolutely biased towards AirCrete after having built and lived in each and every one of these construction methods I've talked about. AirCrete just wins hands down for me in terms of convenience, speed, affordability, and comfort in any climate. So that's it. That's what I got for you. I hope you've enjoyed this series, and I would like to, of course, invite you to attend the Terlingua School of Alternative Building, because it teaches you all of the skills. It gets all of the training into your hands right away without the traditional path of learning, because this is alternative building. Why not alternative learning? A high-speed, rapid-paced course where you learn practically the pieces of the puzzle, how to design them, how to put them together safely to build a functional modern house in 14 days. So I invite you to attend one of these, and we've done everything we can. I like to deliver at least twice the value of what you're paying for, so we're going to be including consulting time as well as a video course, and anything that I can do to help you achieve your dreams, to build that life you want, to get out of the rat race, to have the time and money to travel the world, or to just simply live on the land as a true homesteader without the bills. That is what building your own house can do for you. It's the single most important number one thing you can do, because the average, normal, standardized, accepted lifestyle is to rent or buy a house and spend the majority of your best years of your life paying for a house. And in fact, many elderly people are finding they don't need as big of a house as they have, and they're still looking at a house payment because they've refinanced a few times. Whereas building an AirCrete structure, or any alternative house for that matter, is a skill that empowers you, gives you a feeling like nothing else can, and of achievement and purpose to put yourself in a comfortable living condition where you take the responsibility and the power and the authority back to yourself, and you build an alternative lifestyle so that you can live the way you want to, on your terms, on your time.